Matthew Tomowitz. This is my project 2 for Data 620. So for this project, we've been tasked with identifying a large two-node network dataset consisting of ties between and not within two or more distinct groups, reducing that network using a method such as the island method, and analyzing the groups and drawing conclusions. So I have chosen an ArcSiv dataset compiled by Cornell University that can be found on Kaggle, tracking metadata on scholarly papers published across a number of STEM fields. I extracted the papers and their authors and constructed a bimodal graph with edges representing authorship of a paper. Since most papers have multiple authors, and authors typically collaborate with other experts in their field, we can analyze this graph to get a better understanding of the collaborative patterns present in the STEM field and the crossover between these fields. So as we can see, the graph is quite extensive with several 100,000 nodes and edges, with the largest component consisting of over 75% of the total nodes in the network. Given that there are a large number of small components, we are going to limit our analysis to this single large connected component to draw better insights on the relationships present in these research fields. So when we filter out for the largest component, we can see, once again, it contains the vast majority of nodes and edges, and has an incredibly low density, which makes sense given what one may expect. It's difficult to coordinate large-scale research projects, including many authors, and many authors are not producing hundreds and hundreds of research papers. If you look at the distribution of the degrees, we should note that the counts, the y-axis is logarithmic in this case. We can see that kind of our initial assumptions kind of are bared out, with the vast majority of authors only producing a single paper, and virtually all papers having only a handful of authors, although there are some notable exceptions. As such, it's important to project our bimodal network into single modes in order to draw some conclusions based on the relationships present. When we project onto only author or only paper nodes, we can see that there's hundreds of thousands of nodes and millions to tens of millions of edges. As such, we're going to need to produce some criteria to cut down on the number of relationships in order to be able to produce reasonable conclusions. As we look for a threshold, we can see very clearly the vast majority of edges have a weight of 1, with virtually no edges having a weight more than that value. And if we set our thresholds too high, we won't be able to draw any conclusions. As such, we're going to set a threshold for edge weight of 2, meaning that authors have collaborated on a minimum of 2 papers together, which leaves us with, while still a very small subset of the total edges, a much denser research network, which actually represents those who are making the largest contributions to their fields. A similar phenomena happens with papers, with the vast majority of papers having only a author author in common, which is not particularly interesting when considering the connectedness of different research fields. As such, we will once again be setting the minimum weight to 2, so as to not eliminate too many of the relationships, but to only limit our analysis to meaningful relationships within these research circles. We can see simply adding higher thresholds results in significantly fewer edges and nodes, but to add on to that, even a threshold of 2 creates significantly more components. However, we see a similar phenomena as we did before, with the largest component consisting of the vast majority of nodes as well as edges. So we will be limiting our analysis once again of the projections to strictly these largest components. This is just once again to highlight the largest component makes up the vast majority of those nodes and edges. Although for papers, there are a significant number of nodes that are eliminated. Once again, our analysis is largely focusing on the relationships in these research communities. So while a fair amount of information is lost, it is still acceptable for the purposes of our research. We just need to keep this in mind as we evaluate the generalizability of our conclusions. So we can see the average clustering and particularly transitivity of this author projection are interesting, and we'll get into that. But the vast majority of information is still retained by our projections. So once again, to highlight this transitivity in the author network, specifically, is the global clustering is incredibly high, indicating that there is a very tightly knit nature to these research communities, with authors in these communities having collaborated with most of the members in said community. It's likely those with large numbers of papers authored work in relatively tight-knit research teams with collaborating with individuals who have also collaborated with each other on separate projects. There is a significantly lower average clustering coefficient, although, as we've seen, given the nature of most authors to have not contributed a huge body of research, that is likely pulling this average down and is slightly deceptive. We kind of expect there to be a much more tight-knit relationship among authors with a significant contribution to their field. For papers themselves, though, we see an interesting phenomenon where both the global clustering and the average clustering coefficient are relatively moderate. This means that while collaboration is common, it is generally not exclusive, meaning individuals will frequently collaborate with others, but include new collaborators in their research. This is kind of in line with what we would expect from the research landscape, where there are many PhD students as well as postdocs who may not continue on into academia, but are still collaborating and working under these highly influential, highly productive research heads. When we look at centrality metrics on such a large graph, these can fall victim kind of to the averages, and medians can fall victim to noise. However, they can highlight particularly interesting individuals by looking at combinations of different degree metrics. One example in particular is looking at the degree centrality as well as eigenvector centrality. We see that there are a few individuals such as Katie Milliken, Michael Reed, and David Silver, who are both contributing large numbers of papers with large numbers of different individuals, indicating that they are likely drivers of their various research communities. Different outlier individuals can be identified using these different metrics and could be of particular interest to those trying to find the individuals who are kind of driving innovation in different spheres, but that goes slightly beyond our analysis at the moment. Looking at communities, we see a high level of modularity, once again reinforcing that there's a lot of collaboration within networks that are relatively tight-knit. We see a reasonable number of communities with a solid average size. And looking at the top 10 communities, we can see there aren't really um, massive communities that are necessarily crowding out or dominating the conversation. Um, they tend to be a large number of relatively moderate sized communities producing these research conclusions. Looking at the full bipartite graph, we can see some relatively interesting summary statistics. Vast majority of authors, once again, contribute a single paper. However, the strong right skew of the data suggests that there are significant prolific authors present. And papers, once again, very collaborative. There tend to be 4 to 5 authors per paper, which helps us produce these networks and communities, which result in our analysis. We can see that virtually no papers have a single author, whereas the vast majority of authors, or the majority of authors, do only produce a single paper or are co-authors on a single paper. Um, the redundancy analysis indicates that there is a relatively moderate amount of information lost um, due to the relationship between collaborators being lost. Um, Slightly more than half of a given author's collaborators have also collaborated with each other, which is once again very consistent with tightly knit research communities. So, what can we conclude? Um, our analysis shows us that the vast majority of authors do not produce a significant body of work. However, the space as a whole is highly collaborative, with 4 to 5 authors being frequently very common. The research is driven by highly prolific and highly connected core communities with more transient peripheral members, with a moderate level of connection between these communities. All of this is kind of in line with what we would expect of the research landscape, given the kind of university structure with different departments specializing in different fields, and there being a relatively high amount of collaboration between these departments in terms of innovative breakthroughs and such. Using different centrality measures, you can really begin to find particularly interesting individuals, such as those who perhaps do not contribute frequently, but contribute with so-called high impact or highly connected individuals, those who drive the majority of the output, and those who drive perhaps collaboration between spheres of interest. This could perhaps be more useful for those who are specifically interested in those kinds of metrics. But overall, this graph gives us a great understanding of the total research landscape. Thank you.